Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of the Atheist Experience. I'm your host, Matt Dillahunty. Joining me this week is Russell Glasser.
Hi, everyone.
This is the special fifth Sunday of a month thing, so we had to kind of jump through some hoops. So thanks to the guys behind the scenes who made sure that there was a show for you, that we can keep doing this every week.
I can't believe they still do that stuff like 5 years after I was producing the show or whatever it is.
Not quite sure how the policies work, but we'll do whatever it takes. As I mentioned, we are live. Today is Sunday, March 30th, 2008. This is a live public access television program. We take calls. We'll have a number up for you shortly. We're sponsored by the Atheist Community of Boston, a nonprofit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. The ACA has weekly meetings every Sunday beginning at around 11 o'clock at Romeo's on Barton Springs Road, except for the first Sunday of the month when we host a lecture series at the Austin History Center located at the corner of 9th and Guadalupe. The April lecture coming up, and I didn't bring the information again. We're in a last-minute rush to get the show stuff on here, and I overlooked it, but the lecture is going to be about geological evidence and how it relates to the climate change model. So my apologies for forgetting the lecturer's name. I'm sure they'll get it to me from the studio eventually.
Charles Jackson.
Charles Jackson, thank you. See, I didn't have to wait. We have experts sitting out here in the studio audience ready to feed us information whenever we screw up. So, and you know, you guys could like laugh or something at that. But anyway, welcome again. As I said, the audio portion of this program is available for download from the ACA website, and the ACA website is also a good place to stop by if you're looking for frequently asked questions or contact information for the Atheist Community of Boston. The website's at the bottom of your screen, www.atheist-community.org. The frequently asked questions page is there as well. We'll take calls and we'll answer almost any question. On the rare chance that we have somebody call in to ask the same question repeatedly, I might take the opportunity to just direct you straight to the fact page, where you can find all kinds of things, including, isn't it monumentally depressing living your life without a belief in a God? The short answer is no. Sorry, just not. I don't know. It's good. So I think Tracy reckoned it to, my cats are perfectly happy to live and be cats. If I don't show up, they don't get depressed and kill themselves just because, I'm not around. But
frankly, I wish my cats would be a little more concerned about whether I'm there or not. But the
video portion of this program is available for download. If you go to the ACA website, you can find a link to the TV show site as well, or you can go to www.atheist-experience.com. And on the left-hand side of that page, you can click on the show archive list, scroll down, and you'll find the most recent shows where you can download the audio, and you can expand that list to include the 10-plus years of episodes that the ACA has managed to collect. Many of those, I think there's like 4 or 5 years worth, actually have the video portion available to view at Google Video. And there's some people have taken it upon themselves to cut out like 10 or 11-minute clips and post those up to YouTube, which has drawn some additional attention. And all of the ACA videos is set out there with a GNU public license, and as long as you're not trying to profit from it or misrepresent and distort it. If you find a particular portion of the program that you think was good enough to be ripped out and posted elsewhere, I generally say feel free, but you can always email us and contact us, and maybe we can find somebody with spare time to start doing some of that as well. In addition to this program, the ACA also sponsors a bi-weekly internet audio podcast called The Nonprofits. That's PROPHETS, and you can find out more about that at nonprofitsradio.com. We are live every other Saturday from 2 to 3:30 p.m. We were live yesterday, and we'll be live again in 2 weeks. They may put the date up there. I think it's the 15th or the 14th. I think the 14th. It's hosted by Dennis LeBay, features myself, Russell Glasser, and Schilling. And while we don't take live calls for that program, we do run an IRC chat service in conjunction with the show, and people can listen live and join in the chat and talk to other listeners. Actually, you weren't on the show yesterday, but you did jump into the chat room. So.
Yeah, I was in chat. I did a performance of Mendelssohn's St. Paul last night. I mentioned before that I'm a choral singer, so I was saving my voice for the evening. And it went pretty well, despite the fact that I still think it's kind of a weak piece and the text is anti-Semitic, but which kind of inspired last month's topic.
Yeah, imagine that, St. Paul, anti-Semitic. I never would have thunk it. In addition to the media outreach and lecture programs, the ACA also serves as a social organization promoting communication and interaction and fellowship with other atheists in the Austin area. we're social creatures. We like to hang out with people who are like-minded, and we do that in a number of different ways, including the Atheist Happy Hour every Thursday at the Dog and Duck Pub, beginning at around 7 p.m. That's at 17th Guadalupe. Also, after this program's over, we're on the air till 4:30, and around 5 o'clock we'll go to El Arroyo on 5th Street, and I'll have the address up on the screen in just a second. We're there from 5 to 7-ish. Any atheist or atheist-friendly person is welcome to come to any of our events. You don't have to be a member to attend. You don't have to agree to attend. As long as you're coming down to, enjoy a meal, have a good conversation, we encourage that. But if you're coming down to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch, please pick up the phone and call us and we can discuss it.
You can't actually punch someone over the phone, so that's not as satisfying.
Right, but you can threaten to punch someone over the phone.
That's true, and given the way those people are, that's probably all they were going to do anyway.
Yes. Although now we may actually be provoking them, so.
Shutting up.
As I mentioned, we'll have the number up for you shortly. It's a live call-in program. Please feel free to call in and talk about the subject we're talking about today or anything else that strikes your fancy. We generally, we're here to promote positive atheism, separation of church and state, to represent atheists in the Austin area, to correct misperceptions that come from the pulpit or the media, and promote a dialogue that hopefully leads to understanding for somebody. You, us, them, whoever happens to be listening. We encourage all of that, and so we're looking forward to having callers call in. Before we actually get to that, though, Russell today is going to talk about framing.
Right.
And, not in the sense of making somebody else look guilty for something.
Well, in a way it is. But,
is it?
Not exactly. First, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Why do we have a cow on the control board?
This, see, now we know that my coffee cup I named Muhammad.
Okay.
After they named that bear Muhammad.
Is this a sacred cow by any chance?
It may be, but my coffee cup broke, you see. And so this is now Muhammad. Who is going to be one of the mascots of the show, which was set up here.
I move that we describe him as Muhammad the Sacred Cow.
Muhammad the Sacred Cow. The Holy Cow. Would it be Holy Cow, Sacred Cow? Let's know. Is it better Holy Cow or Sacred Cow?
I like sacred.
So last week we had the bunny rabbit in the Jesus Loves Me t-shirt on the cross. And we stuffed him into a box afterwards. And I can't confirm this myself directly, but what I've heard is that sometime within a couple of days after stuffing him in the box, and the reports don't necessarily disagree. Some people told me that Shelley checked the box. Somebody else said that Joe and Shelley, and somebody else said that it was Steve and Joe and the others went and checked this box. And what they found, and the reports also don't agree. I mean, some the lid was already off the box, and some the lid was moved off the box magically when they got there. But the thing that all the reports agree on is the rabbit was not in the box. That's proof enough for me that the rabbit's been resurrected.
One person wrote that 500 other people had seen the rabbit actually come out of the box. I couldn't get in touch with any of those people, but he said that there were 500 witnesses, so that should be
And I heard that from somebody else, and the fact that we both heard it from sources makes it more reliable. So we should write it down so that, a couple hundred years from now or even...
It will be indisputable.
Yeah, sure.
Especially if you
Why would we lie?
And I write it.
Why would we have no reason to lie? We're honestly reporting on what happened. I promise.
Right. So I'm going to talk about framing today.
Dun, dun, dun.
And framing, I think, as you were saying right before the show, is a really nebulous term. It's hard to pin down a definition. I think by the way, as is often the case when I present on the show, I went to the effort of putting a blog post on the Atheist Experience blog right before the show. That's atheistexperience.blogspot.com. And it's not much. It's just links to most of the stuff that I turned up while reading about this topic. So if you want to follow along with me in your book, go to atheistexperience.blogspot.com now. So I'm going to start with the Wikipedia explanation of what framing is, and as with many things on Wikipedia, it's kind of hit or miss, so take it with a grain of salt. Framing, a term used in media studies, sociology, and psychology, refers to the social construction of a social phenomena by media sources or specific political or social movements or organizations to advance their causes or views. Framing is an inevitable process of selective influence over the individual's perception of the meanings attributed to words or phrases. A frame defines the packaging of an element of rhetoric in such a way as to encourage certain interpretations and discourage others. Now, the English version. I didn't go so far as to print out an English version, but I have examples of representatives of people who talk about framing. I think the most notorious, this is used a lot in politics, and so there's a well-known Republican framing guy named Frank Luntz, who came up with a lot of interesting buzzwords. Some people say that he was kind of instrumental in the big sweep of Congress in, what was it, 1994. Right. And on the other side, we have a chap named George Lakoff who actually looked at Frank Luntz and said, "Hey, here's something we're doing," and then sort of wrote down what his opinions were about framing instead of Frank Luntz, who just did it.
And this, by the way, I mean, if I'm understanding it correctly, and we talked about this a little bit before the show about kind of my layman's distilled definition of framing.
Yeah, you tell us your English version.
Well, to me, this is nothing new, because there's the old adage that it's not what you say, but how you say it. And framing is how you present your argument, or it's a process of presenting your argument in such a way that the greatest percentage of your target audience accepts it.
I think that's correct.
And I like the fact that there's a target audience in there, because without that, there is no framing. There is, you know, the frame's kind of central to you. But in this, what ends up happening with framing is that it ends up being used to manipulate.
I think framing is kind of you could say that there's an objective side to every argument and there's a subjective side. And what framing says is basically that you sort of embrace the subjective. You say, okay, the way my arguments are accepted is going to depend on how well my audience relates to me. And so I'm going to use this to my advantage. I'm going to use my understanding of my audience and try to win over as many of them as possible to my argument, which may or may not have objective merit to it. Right. This is from the Wikipedia entry on George Lakoff. Lakoff argues that the differences in opinions between liberals and conservatives follows from the fact that they subscribe with different strength to different metaphors about the relationship of the state to its citizens. Both, he claims, see governance through metaphors of the family. Conservatives would subscribe more strongly and more often to a model that he calls the strict father model, and has a family structured around a strong dominant father, government, and assumes that the children, citizens, need to be disciplined to be made into responsible adults, financially and morally responsible beings. However, the children are adults, and so the father should not interfere with their lives. The government should stay out of the business of those in society who have proved their responsibility. In contrast, Lakoff argues that liberals place more support in a model of the family which he calls the nurturant parent model, based on nurturant values where both mothers and fathers work to keep the essentially good children away from corrupting influences, pollution, social injustice, poverty, etc. Lakoff says that most people have a blend of both metaphors applied at different times, and that most people have and that political speech works primarily by invoking these metaphors and urging the subscription of one over the other. Here are some examples of political framing from Wikipedia, and I'm going to bring this back to atheism in a minute, but I think this kind of was born as a political term and has only been applied to atheism and science more recently.
Well, one of the things that I find kind of curious is that I'm not completely sure where I fall in the political spectrum, depending on what subject we're talking about, but I don't think I subscribe to either the father model or the mother model. I tend to subscribe to something. This
doesn't strike me as what I've read that Lakoff actually said, and I think this might be the end result of sort of competing edits. because it seems like kind of a schizophrenic description of what he said.
Yeah, and I think I would tend to view the government more as my employee who I've hired to run the business of my life that I'm too busy to run in my daily business.
Yeah, I might buy that.
They shouldn't, they have no need to intrude on my life, but they're there to serve me. They're public servants. They're there to represent my interests and my rights, when discussing how everybody interacts.
One thing I've thought about George Lakoff in the past is that he might have been good at sort of identifying what people are doing, but he's not very good at identifying what the actual frames are and how to use language effectively. He just basically said, hey, look, some people use language more effectively than others, and we should try to harness that, Lakoff being a liberal. But I think he's been kind of not so good at identifying what effective language is, and I think that this guy I'm going to talk about later, Matthew Nisbet, is kind of the same way. A couple of political examples of framing are, for instance, talking about counterterrorism as either law enforcement or war. Lakoff said that Colin Powell argued with the Bush administration that the assault of September 11, 2001 should be treated as a crime, and this would have involved international crime-fighting techniques. But instead of going with the crime frame, the Bush administration went with the war frame and pitched it that way. Another example that was brought up on Wikipedia is the recent popularization of the term surge to describe what some other people call an escalation of the war in Iraq. You can see that if you use one word, it sounds like a good thing. Like, we're surging to victory, was, I believe, the language that was used to pitch this. Whereas if you describe it as an escalation, like, more war, then people come away with a negative opinion of it.
And it's one of the things that, I remember Bush took heat for using the word crusade. That's become such a taboo word that no matter what you're trying to do, that's not going to go over in any framing of what's going on. And it may be the case that what he actually meant by that is something that could have been accepted by the majority of people, whatever, if he'd framed it differently.
Yeah. Maybe.
Well, we can't know now.
Nope. Okay, so I'm going to go now to an article that was written by a chap named Matthew Nisbet on Sunday, April 15th, 2007. Matthew Nisbet, I looked up his, he has a blog. The blog is scienceblogs.com/framing science, I think, or just search for framing science. And his blurb on the blog says, Matthew Nisbet, PhD, is a professor in the School of Communication at American University, where his research focuses on the intersections between science, media, and politics. This is an article that was co-written by Matthew Nisbet and Chris Mooney, who's written a number of books on science. The title of the book is Thanks for the Facts, Now Sell Them. I'm sorry, the title of the article. It says, if the defenders of evolution wanted to give their creationist adversaries a boost, it's hard to see how they could do better than Richard Dawkins, the famous Oxford scientist who had a bestseller with The God Delusion, and who, I'll add, we saw a couple of weeks ago and all enjoyed.
Spoke to. It's the dick to the doc to the PhD. And somebody out there will get that. We were going to show the video today, but it'll have to wait.
Okay. So this is obviously an article that starts off right away critical of Richard Dawkins, and so you can probably tell where our opinions fall on this article.
Maybe. The thing is that there are people who are critical of Richard Dawkins in some other area, and I may actually agree with them.
Yeah.
It's not like Richard Dawkins is the infallible pope of atheism that he often, gets labeled with.
No, in fact, the first thing that that I did as soon as we came out of that Dawkins lecture was come up with some critical things to say about it.
Yeah, everybody enjoyed it. We actually went to Spider House Cafe afterwards and talked about it. And one of the things that kept coming up was, we agree here, we agree here. At this point, we think God probably could have been handled better, or he gave a good answer here and a bad answer here.
Yeah, or we would have handled that better on the show, or something
or
like
I
that.
happen to prefer this explanation, or there are some cases where, I think he's just dead wrong here, or he's not, attacking this point as, some of us might like.
Yeah, I mean, Richard Dawkins certainly isn't in himself, I think, the leader of anything in the atheist movement. I think he's just a good, solid speaker.
A good, solid speaker who we worship and sacrifice children to. Oh, did I say it out loud?
Shoot.
Dope.
Not even so much his speaking abilities. It's his writing abilities and his scientific background that a lot of us respect. But anyway, Nat Nisbet and Chris Mooney are basically advancing the case here that Richard Dawkins is a harmful figure in the pitching of science to an American populace who don't necessarily have as much respect for science as they should. Nisbet and Mooney go on. Leave aside for a moment the validity of Dawkins' arguments against religion. The fact remains the public cannot be expected to differentiate between his advocacy of evolution and his atheism. More than 80% of Americans believe in God, after all, and many fear that teaching evolution in our schools could undermine the belief system that they consider the foundation of morality. Dawkins not only reinforces and validates such fears, baseless though they may be, but lends them an exclamation point. We agree with Dawkins on evolution and admire his books, so we don't enjoy singling him out, but he stands as a particularly stark example of scientists' failure to explain hot-button issues such as global warming and evolution to a wary public. Scientists excel at research, creating knowledge is their forte, but presenting this knowledge to the public is something else altogether. It's here that scientists and their allies are stumbling in our information-overloaded society, even as scientific information itself is being yanked to center stage in high-profile debates.
Now, here's a spot where I agree with what Nisbet is saying.
Tentatively.
This is Chris Nisbet, or is this Chris Mooney? Or it's both of them.
This
is both of them in this article.
Nisbet and Mooney.
The problem that they see is that scientists have generally done a poor job of engaging the public interest in science, and they attribute this to framing. And that may be the case. There may be a better way of framing science. I certainly think that people like Bill Nye have done a good job of encouraging an interest in science in younger people. And maybe we have failed, but it may be that the problem isn't something that could be solved by framing at all. It may be that the general public, or at least the adult public, was never had this fire within them to appreciate science or have an interest in it. It just becomes kind of...
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I mean, the problem that I see with pitching science is that you've got a framing of science, not that it's belligerent and mean, which is apparently what they think that Dawkins pitches, but that it's boring. I mean, the thing that I hear the most coming from like young students is, how is this math and science stuff ever going to affect me when I'm all grown up and doing whatever it is that I want to do that has nothing to do with math and science?
Yeah.
I mean, you've got the image of the sort of stodgy, boring person. If I can call an image to mind, yes, that was exactly what I was going to say.
I trampled your punchline. Sorry.
Ben Stein. Ben Stein is like the stereotypical, really boring, educated guy who wants to tell you. I think he was teaching history in that, but no big difference. If you're smart, then you're a boring egghead.
Something D-O-O economics. Voodoo economics. Anyway.
Right.
See, that's the Ben Stein that we actually liked.
Yes.
He was almost entertaining then.
He was funny by presenting a persona that was not funny.
Yeah, the thing is that now seeing the Ben Stein
really
that's come afterwards,
funny.
I'm not sure he was acting at all in there. I'm not sure that he was trying to present anything humorous. It may have been his serious representation of
they probably just
of academia.
Told him, Ben, we want you to give a good example of a high school teacher. No, I'm sorry, I kid Ben Stein.
Yeah, me too. He friggin' deserves it.
Yeah.
We'll get more to that as the April release of Expelled comes out.
Right.
We've avoided talking about some of it, and people email asking. I'm actually saving up so that we can do a show on Expelled after we've seen it and talk about the whole history of stuff up to then.
Yeah, but, actually I'm going to undercut that a little bit because I'm going to get to some recent news about the movie Expelled, which we've talked about a bunch of times on both shows already. But this is so entertaining that I can't get enough of it. But anyway, getting back to the point about Matt Nisbet and Chris Mooney's take on framing science. I think that they're mistaken about the problem that science has with its public image. The problem isn't that people are scared that science leads to atheism. The big problem that science has is appearing stodgy and boring. And I also think that a little combativeness and a little more public argumentation on behalf of science is actually a good thing because it puts the stuff in the news. I mean, Richard Dawkins has been a very controversial figure recently, but also when we went to see Richard Dawkins 2 weeks ago, there were lines around the block.
Yeah.
I mean, people were excited and interested to go and hear a guy whose main credentials are that he's the Charles Simonyi Professor of the Public Understanding of Science at Oxford University. And that's kind of fantastic if you think about it.
Except
yeah,
that I don't think anybody was there at all with regard to his position on the public understanding of science.
True.
Or science at all. The thing that drew people there was this current kind of broadening interest in atheism, religion in general, the creation evolution debate, the kind of the public conversation and consciousness raising that's gone on. So, it's great. It would have been, if you just said that the Charles Simonyi Chair of the Public Understanding of Science at Oxford was coming to UT to give a lecture, there wouldn't have been 1,400 people standing out there.
Maybe not. But the fact is, that's what he is, and
Yes.
they showed up to see him, and that's pretty cool.
Yes.
I mean, because among other things, he did talk a lot about science. Sort of tangentially to his talk about atheism, but certainly he brought it up. Richard Dawkins, speaking of him, and speaking also of Ben Stein, they were both in the news. This comes from the New York Times last week, or I think 2 weeks ago. This was shortly after, this was like a couple of days after Richard Dawkins showed up in Austin. He went to Minnesota and hooked up with another guy that we like and respect greatly, P.Z. Myers, the author of the blog Pharyngula, who is an evolutionary biologist in the University of Minnesota Morris. And lo and behold, there happened to be a screening of this movie Expelled that day that Richard Dawkins was visiting. And so P.Z. Myers signed up on their free and open website that said sign up for the free screening of Expelled No Intelligence Allowed with Ben Stein, which I believe from what I've read, this website where you could sign up for free tickets was was an open web page that anybody could log into, but mostly it was being target mailed to Christian groups.
Right.
So naturally, somebody forwarded it to P.Z. Myers, and he looked it up and said, "Sure, I'll go there." And he signed up with a certain number of guests.
You know, and honestly, while I don't have any evidence of anything surrounding this, and I don't want to fall into the paranoid conspiracy theory, it seems rather serendipitous that they would have a screening in Minneapolis at the same time that Atheist Alliance International is having their conference. I mean, it would be cool if somebody could track down when they actually scheduled this and how it relates to the announcement of this conference.
Right.
But there was no screening in Austin, or I'd have found a way to go.
Yeah, I would too.
And so we'll see it when it comes out.
But anyway, what happened was P.Z. Myers signed up under his own name, and so when he got there, the security thugs were waiting for him. And they showed up and they said, "Oh, are you Paul Myers? I'm sorry, but the producer has specially asked me to get you out of line." So P.Z. Myers got kicked out, but Richard Dawkins was only listed as one of the unnamed guests of P.Z. Myers. They had no idea that he was coming, and so he got in and saw the movie, and there's a very entertaining review of it on his website now, richarddawkins.net, I believe. So this has stirred up a big controversy, and one of the amusing things about these particular characters, Dawkins and P.Z. Myers together, is that they were both in the movie. They were interviewed under false pretenses for a movie called Crossroads, where they were they went in claiming that they were going to cover both sides of the evolution debate, when in fact they were intending all along to make this a movie Expelled about the perils of big evil science. And so that was funny because they kicked him out while at the same time acknowledging him as one of the stars of the movie in the end credits.
Yeah, I mean, this whole thing, and I'm sure we'll get to this after the movie when we talk about it, it's just been this parade of lies. They lie about what the movie is in order to get the interviews. They lie to him throughout the process of the interviews. If you read a report from Michael Shermer, they continually asked him this one question over and over again. And at some point he said, "Are you just asking me that question as many times as possible until I give you the answer you want?" And Ben Stein actually got up, I'm not saying it happened at this point, got up and left and said, "I need a break," after they'd been interviewing for a short period of time, and goes down to his car and comes back and asks a few more questions and then goes right back to the other question that he was asking. I just, it's clear to me that they're...
Well, the question wouldn't be, by any chance, anyone? Anyone?
No, it's clear to me that they were doing their best to solicit specific answers for use. And they were trying to exercise some framing in asking a question in such a way that you get the response that you're looking for.
Yeah.
And they were failing, which means they're really bad at this. So this happens. Then there's the whole production of the movie, the lying about what it's about. They've lied about. The other day they claimed that their blog was the #1 blog, and PZ showed statistics.
Well, this is actually a funny story, so I want to go into a little more detail about it. P.Z. Myers blogged about being kicked out of the movie,
right.
And this became a really popular post. And so then the producers of Expelled, and not only was his post really popular, but a lot of other people commented on his post about being kicked out of the movie. And those became popular. And so a few days later, the producers of the movie come back and they say, "Hey, look, Expelled is one of the most popular topics on the internet right now."
You wouldn't believe the buzz about our new movie. That's exactly the way it went down. And meanwhile, you've got, it's not just the idea that somebody who's in the movie, who's thanked for being in the movie, is removed from the line while somebody else isn't. Richard Dawkins, after the movie was over and there was a question and answer period, stood up from the middle of the theater, and I'm pretty sure I would have given at least part of an appendage to be there to see the look on this guy's face when it happens. Because he stands up and says, "I'm Richard Dawkins, and I'd like to ask as my question why one of my colleagues who also appears in this film was denied access to see it, when your whole point is that big science is denying you access to express your views." And there was this huge back and forth, and Mark Mathis, I think is his name, who's the producer of the movie.
Yeah, that's right.
Blatantly lied, and has told 4 or 5 different stories at different times about why PZ was excluded. And at one point, he finally said, no, he wasn't causing any disturbance, etc. I didn't want PC to see the movie because I want him to wait in line in April and pay his $10 to see it. And holy cow. You paid this guy to appear in your movie. Couldn't you just charge him $10 less and let him see the preview? You really need his $10? You already lied to him to get the information you need, and now you're, I want him to pay to see this.
Not to mention the fact that he was in a line full of people who were seeing the movie for free.
Yeah. I get it. And now, there was this whole phone call thing, which I don't know if you've got on there.
Yeah, well, no, I didn't bring that with me, but that was kind of funny, too.
The other day, they're having a conference call about the movie and telling all kinds of lies, because the premise of this movie, for those who don't know, is that Darwinism, whatever the hell that is, leads to atheism, which leads to Nazism, which leads to the Holocaust. Oh, and by the way, they won't let us talk about intelligent design in schools. But the real point of the movie is that Darwinism leads to atheism.
Well,
leads
it's
to
all
Nazism,
tied
leads to
together
Holocaust.
because by censoring people who would like to talk about intelligent design, they're acting as totalitarian Nazis.
Yes. Although,
which is ridiculous.
Using it as a metaphor is one thing. Evidently, in the film, they cut back and forth between Dawkins and P.Z. Myers and goose-stepping Nazis, and Ben Stein goes on a tour of concentration camps. They're making this point rather strong.
Right.
And it's insane.
Subtle. Very subtle.
So PZ finds out what the secret password is to their call-in conference call, because one of them said it. Hey, here's the secret password. And he calls in to challenge them on this and say, basically, I keep hearing you guys lie about all this. Don't you realize there was anti-Semitism in Germany long before even Nazism? If that's your thing, look up pogrom. Get some actual pogrom. Get some actual information on the subject. But they were like, who is this? And he's like, it's P.Z. Myers. Oh, you're the guy who tried to crash the screening, and now you're crashing our call. And he's like, they're misrepresenting the whole thing. They talk about how their blog's #1, and so he posted numbers about it. And then they basically said, you weren't invited to this call. We need you to leave. And
do the honorable thing and hang
he's
up.
like, I'll do the honorable thing and hang up while you guys do the dishonorable thing and keep lying. But before I go, I'd like to let any media and news services know that if they'd like to talk to somebody about this, because these guys were accusing Myers and Dawkins of not addressing the actual topic, the subject matter in their film, that they were just pulling up these ancillary kind of arguments against it. And so he gave his email address to the media, and I'm sure he's even more flooded than normal. But
well, unfortunately, this is turning into the show where we just talk about other people's blogs.
Yes.
But and speaking of which, I'll just remind people who tuned in late that you can go to my own blog, or to atheistexperience.blogspot.com, the show's blog, and see the post that I wrote today, which is basically a list of links to stuff relating to this topic.
But let's get back to what you were talking about, because we got sidetracked there.
We have a couple of callers.
Yeah, the calls are starting to come in. The numbers up on the screen. After they're done with the screening, we'll get to that.
Yeah. Well, trust Matt Nisbet to show up in his blog, Framing Science, and insert his unasked for 2 cents about P.Z. Myers' impact.
Which he's perfectly free to do.
Yes, he is.
And we're perfectly free to think he's a moron for doing it.
And we do. Nisbet posts a clip from the movie that involved the sliced-up interview of P.Z. Myers. And I don't know how the full interview went, but actually I thought that P.Z. Myers looked pretty much fine in that clip.
Yeah, I had no problem with it at all.
But he says, if you haven't seen this clip yet, here above is a preview of the central message on how big science views religion in the documentary Expelled. There's little work needed on the part of the producers, since the message is spelled out via the interview provided by P.Z. Myers and Richard Dawkins. Interviews. Notice the very clear translation for audiences as to what supposedly establishment science believes. Learning about science makes you an atheist. It kills off religious faith. If we boost science literacy in society, it will lead to erosion of religion as religion fades away. We will get more and more science and less religion. Religion is a fairy tale. That's a direct quote from PZ. Similar to hobgoblins, a fantasy, and even evil. The simplistic and unscientific claim that more knowledge leads to less religion might be the particular delusion of Dawkins, Myers, and many others, but it is by no means the official position of science, though they often implicitly claim to speak for science.
What is the official position of science? Since isn't Nisbet the official spokesman for science?
Actually,
Mark, are you the official spokesman for science? Does science have an official position?
Well, skipping down to the end of this post, he says, "So, Richard and PZ, when it comes to Expelled, it's time to let other people be the messengers for science. This is not about censoring your ideas and positions, but rather being smart, strategic, tactical, and ultimately effective in promoting science rather than your own personal ideology, books, or blogs."
Hey, you know something? Hey, Nisbet, if you're watching, I can explain this to you. You're a tool. They're not the messengers for science. They didn't go out looking for this. They were specifically approached by the producers of the movie. And you know why? Because they're the ones who are most likely to say the things that the producers wanted in the movie in the first place. That's why they didn't come talk to you, because you're irrelevant. You're a softie. You're not willing to say the things that need to be said in order to appear in this movie. And you're certainly not advocating science. You're just sitting around denigrating the people who you think put you in a bad position. Go away.
Well, and beyond that, you know, they're not really the official spokespeople for science.
Nobody
They're
is.
just a couple of guys who write books and blogs. But they happen to be incredibly popular books and blogs.
Yeah.
And the reason they're incredibly popular is because a whole bunch of people enjoy reading what they have to say, us included.
If you can't get popular by imitating them, sure, let's get popular by criticizing them.
Yeah,
way to go,
just
Nisbet.
gripe about how popular they are. Yeah. So I'm going to get, and there's also linked on the blog PZ's reaction to Nisbet, which I think I won't read because you can go read it yourself. But it should be pretty obvious what we think about Nisbet's point of view about framing science at this point.
Yeah, his response uses the F word and not framing or faith.
Right, which we use all the time on the nonprofits, but we kind of try to self-censor around here.
F yeah.
But I'm going to wrap up here with a few thoughts because I'm sure that all our loyal audience are sitting there waiting to hear me say, "But Russell, what do you think about how we should frame atheism?" Everybody's just been hanging on for this moment, no doubt.
But Russell, what do you think about how we should be framing atheism?
I have a few things to say about this. And I will finish this up and then take some callers who it seems do want to talk about framing a little
Unfortunately,
bit.
we're out of time. I represent Big Science, who is here to prevent Russell from presenting his view on... Oh, I'm sorry. That's not the way things actually work.
I'm stopping this sketch because it's become too silly. Atheism does have a framing problem. There is basically a political problem where atheism is defined as an evil and immoral ideology among people who just want to go around sinning without being hampered by the God who wants you to behave in a moral way. And that's idiotic. And it's how a lot of people see atheism. There are a lot of people in the country who have a vested interest in turning the discussion about religion into a whole big talk about it being us versus them. It's the mean, evil secularists who are causing this culture war and want to destroy society's morals. And the result is that we should write into our legislation what Richard Dawkins highlighted in the Texas Constitution, that there shall be no religious test for office, same as the U.S. Constitution, as long as the candidate believes in a supreme being. But Matt Nisbet is right about one thing, which is that 80% of the United States is Christian, and that's not going to change very soon. Which is why I think, and maybe Matt Nisbet would agree with me, that it would be a mistake to turn this into a big us versus them battle. Sort of framing it as, you're either with us or you're our enemy. Guess what? If us means atheists, then we're going to have 80% of America being our enemies. And that isn't something that we want to aim at, nor should we. But I don't think there's a problem overall with treating this as a battle of us versus them. In fact, I think we shouldn't shy away from the conflict. I think we should embrace it. It's just that I think that it's important to get our say about who us and them actually are. People like Jerry Falwell, the late Jerry Falwell, and the current James Dobson and Pat Robertson are always talking about a culture war. And I think that if somebody says that they're in a war against you, then, like it or not, you're in a war against them. You just can't help it. If somebody says, I'm going to come kick your butt, you can't avoid a fight by saying, I'm not going to fight. But what people like this rely on is that they will turn it into a fight between atheists and religious people. And I think that that the framing that is valid here is redrawing the battle lines. Because it's not about religion versus no religion, because the religion side includes a lot of people that that reasonable religious people don't and shouldn't identify with. Like, just to rattle off a few: Fred Phelps, Jerry Falwell, Tim LaHaye, the Reverend Sun Myung Moon, and Osama bin Laden. I mean, the former presidential candidate Mitt Romney gave a speech on religion, which we just thought was dead wrong, where he said freedom requires religion, just like religion requires freedom.
Prove it. Prove it.
Not true. And as long as we all believe in God, and of course he was trying to justify why Christians should vote for a Mormon, then we're all on the same side. And I thought it was interesting because he didn't exclude Osama bin Laden from that. Whereas we would. We are emphatically not on the side of Osama bin Laden. And so here's what I think is the frame. The frame is not religious people versus not religious people. The important battle lines are sane people versus nuts. And the sane people are the people on our side and include a whole lot of people who believe in God. And we disagree with them. We think that God is not real, like Richard Dawkins does. But we also believe that reasonable people can disagree without trying to kill each other, without trying to obliterate each other, without trying to legislate away each other's rights. We believe that we can do things like this program, where we talk about our rational reasons for not believing in God, and then we take callers and they argue with us, and sometimes they make good points, and we still disagree with them, but we hang up friends. I think that if people like Pat Robertson and Tim LaHaye want to say we're in a culture war, fine. Let it be a war of them against everybody else.
Yeah.
They're the ones who declared the damn war. Let them fight against the 80% of sane people in the country. And I think Matt Nisbet comes dangerously close to the wrong side of that line when he reacts to P.Z. Myers and Richard Dawkins just expressing their opinion, which is something that rational people do, and saying, please stop talking now because you will make people afraid of you. Screw you, Nisbet.
Can I get an amen? Anyway, we got callers on all the lines, and I don't want to keep people holding because we're actually running behind where we normally would be. But
yeah,
that was good stuff to get to.
Time.
So, is it James?
Yes, sir.
How you doing, James?
I'm doing great.
Cool.
I just want to let you know that you have a good show going.
Thanks.
And,
Oddly enough, the message says that we offended you.
No, that's the...
Actually, the reason why I said that is because I am a Christian and I believe in a God.
Mm-hmm.
But what you're talking about, framing atheism and all this hubbub, and all this malarkey, would be like, say for instance, you say that God isn't real or fake. Well, that's not true.
Okay.
Okay. Somebody calls and says that every week.
Yeah.
Why does that offend you, though?
Because you guys are atheists, you don't believe.
Right.
You are teaching other people that God doesn't exist, that science rules the world. And you guys
Not
just
quite,
make
but
me
okay.
sick.
Said that.
And we what?
You guys just make me sick.
Okay.
Okay, thanks for calling.
You have any good reason why you believe a God exists, or do you just believe
The
it?
reason why I believe that God exists is because he's, I'm not talking about whatever you guys are saying on your show, but
We weren't talking about God for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, you get to define whatever God it is you believe in. I'm just curious what it is and why you think it exists.
Because he does exist, because with or without, visible or invisible, that means he still exists. He's inside of you like everyone else. But yet, you just sit there and tell him that he's a bad person.
Okay.
I don't know that any of that made any sense, but thanks for calling. Appreciate it. Is it Alex?
And now I've lost some of my momentum.
Yeah.
I think I just slowed the show right
James is
now.
kind of a buzzkill. but-
Alex?
Hello?
Hello?
You there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, before you talk, first of all, let me say this to everybody. Turn down your TVs and concentrate on the phone, because there's a new 4-second delay, so we're going to get feedback, and it's going to look really weird trying to talk to somebody who's 4 seconds behind you. So go ahead, Alex.
Okay, what do you think about blogs?
Blogs?
About blogs, yeah.
We're big fans.
Atheist blogs?
Wait.
I have two questions. My first question is, what do you think about blogs?
Right.
I have a blog, and I also contribute to the Atheist Experience blog, so I guess that should make my answer obvious.
And I use Google Reader to check, I don't know, 20-some-odd blog feeds every day.
Okay.
Me too.
My second question is, do you have Asperger's syndrome?
Asperger's?
Yeah.
No.
Let me check.
Yeah, no. So, but anyway, the note
You're
that was
just stuck.
the note that was actually on your call was that we should promote the Atheist Longhorns at UT, and
Which was an excellent point.
despite being a complete asshat, you had a good point when you talked to the screener. We should. The Dawkins presentation was a joint production between the Center for Inquiry, the Secular Student Alliance, and the Atheist Longhorns, who are affiliated with the Secular Student Alliance. That's actually run. The Atheist Longhorns was founded by Sandra Scythe, who's an ACA member, a really good friend of mine. They did a fabulous job, and I was down there. You know, it was kind of controlled chaos the night of the event, because nobody, I think, really had a good grasp on how many people were likely to show up. And when the line went all the way around the building and down the street and back, and it was clear that not everybody was going to get in, and we were trying to get tickets, and there were technical difficulties. They did a fabulous job in getting all this organized and bringing somebody like that here. I've said about 20,000 times how awesome she is and how awesome the group is for doing that.
They are very awesome.
All the volunteers there. Almost everybody I talked to.
They brought
was
in
pleased
Dan
with it.
Barker also.
Yeah, the first lecture they had was Dan Barker from the Freedom from Religion Foundation, which was also another good lecture. So we enjoyed
You're
that
doing
as
a stellar job, guys. Keep it up.
well. We've got, is it Steve?
Yes.
And you have a better way to framing.
Well, most of the time when I hear about words like framing, this is like the first time I've heard rhetoric called framing. I always notice people talk about what it does, but they don't talk about how it's done. And, most decisions are made rationally or emotionally, and that it seems that framing or rhetoric uses the fact that most of us do a lot of things emotionally, make a lot of decisions emotionally.
That's true.
And to understand emotions, I found it best to use emotion pumps. And the simplest way to get into emotion pumps is to talk about how one would be like the problem solution. Another one would be what comedians use, which I call the sad mad. And that's where you start off like Rodney Dangerfield, looking like silly, sad, you know, I don't get no respect. And then you finish it with, kind of a
righteous indignation, maybe?
Yeah, where you're mad or you're angry.
Yeah.
And that people like Don Rickles may emphasize more the mad state.
And Lewis Black. Lewis Black would be a really good example of mad.
Yeah.
Yeah. But basically it's a pump where the comedian on stage pumps the audience by showing sad expressions, and then, you know...
They're manipulating the audience's emotional state to get them on board with what they're getting ready to say.
Yeah, and it's, you know, it's look how pathetic I am, and I don't have any, you know, nothing is going right in my life.
There's actually something...
Instead of feeling sorry for the person, because it is a joke, because it is a play on words, or it's, you know, something that's silly, we end up laughing. And I think the same thing's true with problem solution and inducing fear, where one of the ways I read was, you know, if you laugh at somebody and then roll your eyes, that they kind of question themselves, like a little fear, you know, like, who, me? You know, what, am I saying something wrong? And that all of these emotions are kind of circular. And that the only people that I've heard that talk about this are ones that say that a lot of the problem with humanity is that we think linearly. And we make opposites out of, you know, love and hate and, you know, love and anger and stuff like that. And that confuses us. Whereas if you looked at it circularly, where, you know, we roll around these emotions and we play off of them, and it's a circular thing, you tend to not be caught up in a linear or dualistic way of thinking, which is a really good way of thinking because it explains a whole lot of things like up and down and hot and cold.
You know, a lot of framing does seem to be about manipulating emotions, and there is a lot of utility, I've noticed, to people using fear as a way of getting people to agree with them. And I think on the other side, there can be a tendency to sort of get upset about that. Like, look at that that mean politician or religious person who's using fear to frame me. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I'm a strong advocate of is, you know, those tactics are used because they work.
Right.
And it's not necessarily all that effective to whine about how well they're working about you, but it is how well it's working on you. But it is effective to take tactics that work and use them in legitimate ways. So whereas they might say, you know, whereas Pat Robertson might say that all the atheists and abortionists and stuff caused 9/11 because God lowered his magical shield of protection, which is absurd, but it gets the emotion across. I think it's equally effective to say, look at these lunatics like Pat Robertson who want to bring about the end of the world. Look, he wrote it right here.
Yeah. And also the kind of sad, we're the underdog thing gets played up and used all the time, not just always humorously. As a matter of fact, it's in the Expelled movie.
Expelled, yeah.
You've got Ben
Perfect
Stein
example.
walking along saying, you know, where is this Discovery Institute? Oh, surely it must be this massive thing. And no, surely it must be this whole building. Well, you know, surely it must be a whole floor on this building. Oh, it's only half a floor with, you know, 30 or so people. Oh, they're just a tiny group, and look how put upon they are by big science. You know, so it gets used all the time, and I think those are great points about how perhaps we not only don't have a good understanding of emotions and how they work. Most of us, and we're not always aware of how they're being manipulated. But certainly they are, and I think it's one of the key elements to framing an issue.
Well, I think one of the things that gets to me is the fact that the inability to understand emotions, I think, really comes from a linear way of thinking about it, and a circular way of thinking about it tends to get you out of it. One of the things I saw on some American Idol was the contestant got really mad and started screaming and yelling and threatening the judges, you know, like, come on up here, I'll kick your ass.
How did that work for him?
And the time I was watching it, because one of the judges was this big guy, and the whole time I was watching it, I was thinking, that guy needs to lean back and laugh out loud as hard as he can, and what it does is it's kind of a spin. It's kind of like, if you see how emotions work, it's like not laughing at a comedian or doing something like that, where it sends the person on. It's like, hey, you're trying to be Don Rickles, aren't you? Yeah, you're pretty funny. This act may work, but we're trying to find singers
make
here.
a meta commentary in a way.
Yeah. Well,
and this is how I see it. Most people need to look seriously at their at what gets underneath their skin. When they get really upset because someone is insulting them, they've got to realize that your only defense against that, because anybody on any part of the world can insult you. And if you're going to take offense and hurt from that, then you need to look at, hey, wait a minute, if I'm letting this guy push me around from afar, then, I need to look at insults less as, oh my God, this guy insulted me and, we need to do bad things against him, as opposed of being able to treat it for what it is.
I guess one of the things you can do in a situation like that is change the frame to, oh look, this guy called me a big jerk, to, oh look, this guy is desperate because he's using ad hominems on me.
Right.
And that's a good way to get things turned around for a target audience.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I see that as happening. As long as you see that we go through the same emotions in a circle over and over and over again, and we bounce them off each other, kind of skipping one, and then you get into a roll, and then if you skip an emotion, you leave somebody kind of hanging, and if they're not aware of it, then they're being pushed into an emotional state, and if they are aware of it, then they immediately see what's happening to them, realizing that they can't go backwards, they just go forwards in this circle of different emotional states.
I think we're kind of getting off track at this point, Stephen. I'm not sure that I follow all that, but I'm certainly open to discussing it more. We got other calls online. Definitely some good points about framing there and how emotions are used for that. And we're going to go ahead and move on to other callers.
We should also remind people that you can send mail to TV at atheist-community.org.
Thanks a lot.
That was next. Thanks, Steve. If you don't get through on the telephone today, or you don't want to, you can email TV to atheist-community.org. That goes to myself, most of the co-hosts, some of the people behind the scenes as well. Also, after the show's over today, we'll be going to El Arroyo on 5th Street. We got about 25 minutes or so left, and we'll be down there around 5 o'clock for a couple hours. Any atheist or atheist-friendly person is welcome to join us down there. Hey, we don't need all of that up there. We had credits up already.
I'm not...
That's all right. Is Chris?
Hi.
Hey, how you doing?
Pretty good. How are yourself?
Good.
Fine.
Mike, I have one question and a second question if we have time. My first question is about the Richard Dawkins lecture on the UT campus.
Right.
Yeah.
I actually had an opportunity to go out to that lecture, and it was really great. but I thought that his argument was a little bit flawed in the major problem he found with organized religion.
Which argument?
Well, one of the things that he continuously cited was that faith is the major basis for organized religion, but it necessarily can't be proved or disproved.
I don't remember him discussing that at all.
He spoke about it at the end during the question section.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also an opinion that he expressed in a couple previous lectures I saw online.
Okay, maybe you're just phrasing it differently, but what was the point?
The point was that faith is the basis for organized religion, but it necessarily can't be proved or disproved.
Okay.
It's sort of the reason for believing in organized religion.
I guess sort of I see what you're saying. I guess sort of
basically.
I guess almost the definition of faith that he and I actually would use is belief that doesn't rest on material evidence.
Yeah, exactly. That's almost exactly how he phrased it, I think.
Okay.
And I think the same argument can be made against atheism as well.
Really? How?
In that, if there's no evidence that God exists or does not exist, so atheism is just as flawed in its argument. Because it can't be proven or disproven by the same means.
Let's go with Loch Ness Monster.
Loch Ness Monster. Go for it.
Do you believe that the Loch Ness Monster exists?
Probably not, but I mean, I won't be punished.
Congratulations. With regard to the Loch Ness Monster, you are the equivalent of an atheist. There is no, I mean, theism is the proposition that a God actually exists, that you believe that a God exists. Anything short of that belief, whether it's doubt, whether you use like a colloquial definition of agnosticism, it's all atheism. There's theism and there's atheism, those people who do not believe. Now, there's a separate category of anti-theist or strong atheism where you believe and positively assert that no gods exist. You may consider that to be unreasonable. I know plenty of people who do. However, I think that in my case, just because there are two options, either God exists or God does not exist, that does not make the odds 50-50 between the two of them. So what I'm doing and what atheists are doing is rejecting this proposition that God exists. It takes no faith to do that. I'm not relying on faith at all. I'm saying this proposition, the case has not been made for it. The evidence has not managed to demonstrate the efficacy of this claim. That's it. It doesn't take faith. All it takes is an examination of the evidence and saying, nope, you haven't met your burden of proof.
Okay, I understand where you're coming from. I'm personally an atheist, but I think that sort of the evidence that you would cite in either case doesn't prove or disprove either case. Just looking at the existence of God alone.
Right, but the point of bringing up something like the Loch Ness Monster is that you can't disprove the existence of the Loch Ness Monster either. But atheism is only the position that it's not worth actively putting a belief in something that you don't know exists. That basically the correct attitude is being skeptical toward the existence of anything that doesn't have any evidence behind it. The default attitude.
That makes sense, but to take your analogy of the Loch Ness Monster and maybe extend it a little bit, like take the position of you and I not believing in the Loch Ness Monster, and consider that if the Loch Ness Monster does exist and we don't believe in the Loch Ness Monster, we burn in hell eternally. However, if we don't believe in the Loch Ness Monster and he doesn't exist, then we're okay.
Oh, so what you're doing...
From a theoretic standpoint, and the two of you being middle-aged, slightly overweight men, wouldn't it be better for you to play it safe?
I don't know that he actually qualifies for the slightly overweight, but what you're actually
quite a bit.
What you're actually doing with that is making an appeal to Pascal's wager, which is basically saying that, you know, if the Christian is right, and by the way, I don't believe for a second that you're an atheist, but if the Christian is right,
or that we're at the Richard Dawkins
then they get to go to heaven forever, and they've lost nothing. But if we're right, nobody's lost anything because we're all dead, and Pascal's wager fails on every single level. It's a false dichotomy. It ignores all the other possible religions. It ignores other heavens. It ignores other hells. It makes the claim that worshiping, believing, costs you nothing when that's not true. If this is the one and only life you have, then every minute that you've spent believing, worshiping, every dime that you've spent in deference to a God is wasted. So there's not a no-loss situation at all. And also, just because you happen to believe in one particular God doesn't mean you've avoided the hell of some other one. It's flawed start to finish, whether you use the Loch Ness Monster or Jeebus. It doesn't make any difference. And by the way, it also makes a couple of other presumptions. One, it presumes that belief is subject to the will, and that by determining that you're in a safe bet situation, you can go ahead and choose to believe as kind of like a covering your ass thing, which also makes the presumption that this God that you're believing in is silly enough that he'll buy into your covering your ass conclusion. Pascal's wager is one of the most ridiculous things. As a matter of fact, when anybody starts emailing to have a conversation with me outside of the show, the first thing I tell them is, I'll have any conversation, I'll consider any evidence you present for the existence of God, I'll have whatever discussion you want, using whatever definitions you want. But the second you bring up Pascal's wager, the conversation's over. And so goodbye.
And by the way, for future callers, you do not have to lie in order to get on the show.
Yeah.
You can actually say who you are, and we will let you on.
As a matter of fact, when calls are full, if you tell me that you're some raving young earth creationist who thinks that I sacrifice
we will probably
puppies to
move
Satan,
you right to the front.
You're getting ahead of somebody calling in to say, hey, you're doing a great job on the show. We love watching it. I mean, yeah, I appreciate all those. I love all those calls and that feedback. And we like to know that anything that we've talked about or done here has served somebody in some way. But the show is really about prompting discussion. And one of the things that we find enjoyable and that a lot of the viewers find enjoyable is conversations between people who disagree. I'm not trying to convince that guy's mind or change that guy's mind or convince him of anything, but there are other people listening. And, you know, we don't want to turn this into the, you know, patting each other on the back show. So
no,
yeah,
of course not.
if you're a young Earth, please call in and tell me what is it that has convinced you that the Earth is 6,000 to 10,000 years old, and how you dismiss all of the geological evidence that exists actually,
right.
Since it all disputes you. But we don't actually have info.
We don't have right.
I'm going to cover two quick things, or one quick thing, and then
I have a discussion topic we could spin off that you're familiar with, but. What do you got?
One quick thing, I got a note from somebody, and I'll look this up for later, but there's a church that is offering door prizes in order to encourage $50 gas cards in order to encourage people to come to their church.
Oh.
I find that kind of amusing. King Abdullah.
That is a desperate church.
Yes. King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia, who met with the Pope not too long ago, and the Pope said, hey, you know, things are going pretty good. We got 300,000 Catholics in Saudi Arabia. Could we actually, like, build a church for them? And he's like, no. There are no churches allowed in Saudi Arabia. Mosques are the only thing that are allowed in Saudi Arabia. They are opposed to all of these other monotheistic religions. But King Abdullah has determined recently that atheism is a terrifying phenomenon that must be annihilated. So he's put out the call for all monotheistic religions, who really are kind of brothers, according to him, to get together to work on a way to annihilate atheism. So despite the fact that, you know, he doesn't allow other religions in there, he wants to work with them to get rid of us. Boy, I love that. I love it. Mm-hmm. And one of the main rabbis in the UK is like, oh, this is a great idea, you know, and the Pope's like, yes, we're looking forward to these interfaith discussions with people who have shunned us and refused to allow us into their country for years, so that we can go after the evil secularists who represent such a small portion of the population but seem to have all the degrees and all the brains. Uh-oh.
It's Three Eyes.
It is, but I'm going to wait.
Oh.
All right, no, I'll end the show with the other thing. We did mention emailing in. You can email tv@atheist-community.org.
Wasn't Chris the last guy we took?
Yes, it's gone. Ignore that.
Yeah.
What was I saying? Email.
Email.
We get lots of email on lots of subjects, and I'm happy to try and answer as many of them as I can. But there seems to have been a big rush lately on specific emails that go something like this. Hey, Matt, you've mentioned such and such on the show. Where is that in the Bible? And because I like to make sure information gets out, I actually pass it along, and usually it doesn't take too long. And I don't mind, and I'm not saying stop emailing on this, but holy crap, Google is your friend. And if you know all the keywords of what I'm talking and enter them into Google or BibleGateway.com, you'll get the verse. When I talk about all of, and IronChairs.org is another good resource. Thank you.
Producers.
When I mentioned recently about at the time of Jesus' death, which I may have misstated it and talked about it at the time of the resurrection, that the Bible talks about the saints crawling up out of their graves and going into the town and being seen. All of these dead people rising, they're like, where in the Bible is that? Well, it's Matthew 27, and it's verses 50 to 53-ish. Matthew's the only book that tells us about it. It's absolutely insane, but we want to.
Okay.
you want to hit that or go to?
I was going to say something, but I forgot. So
Let's go to. Is it Three Eyes?
hey, Three Eyes, pulled me
didn't
ghosts
you-
out of the river lately.
Yeah, you gave us the instructions for viewing in a mirror under running water to see the other world, right?
You want to run that by me again?
This is Three Eyes, right?
Yeah, I'm not hearing you too good. You know, recently some of the people have been complaining on PACT about the reception quality. Is
Right.
a conspiracy
Yeah, we got a
like
lot of
that.
email about that.
We're working
too.
on the
I've got the
audio.
mute button on my TV. I just can't hear you very well. At any rate, if you can hear me fine, that's okay with me.
Right.
The first thing I'd like to say is commenting once again publicly about this framing idea. It's not anything new. The idea is anything new. It was an old idea of confusing people.
Yep.
I discussed before about the fact that the very word atheism is a framing example, and it comes about because the authorities do not want you to think of atheism as being something good. So they call atheism Buddhism and communism and socialism, which they don't want you to believe in or practice. But they could call it just as well atheanity like Christianity, or Buddhism could be called Buddhianity instead of Buddhism.
What about
It's just
Judaism? They call
association,
themselves
mind
that.
association that to fool stupid people by switching the meaning of words.
Uh,
You know, originally in America, the word sophistication meant to put sugar into your brew to speed up the fermentation process.
This is not
When
gonna
people
work
got
if you
wise
can't
to the
hear
fact
us.
that alcohol that had sugar in the fermentation process wasn't healthy, they changed the word to mean it's something cool. You know, they've been doing this for thousands of years. There's nothing new about this.
Okay.
In the state of Alaska, the people are communists, but this is not well known. Every adult citizen in Alaska gets a check for their share of the oil because in Alaska it's illegal for one person or one corporation to own the oil.
Okay.
The people own.
I put you on hold. What's this have to do with anything?
Media is the fact that the media.
That's what I thought. Thanks for playing.
Okay, sorry about that.
I did this yesterday, and I'm gonna try and do it a little softer. And I didn't bring the details because I wasn't sure I wanted to go into it. Yesterday, it turned into a long, profanity-filled rant. I won't do that today. Instead, I'm going to frame this slightly different and mention that if you want to go out and read a news story that will hopefully rip your heart out, you can go and Google it, Google News or wherever you want to go, about an 11-year-old girl who was diagnosed with diabetes and who is now dead. Dead because her parents decided that rather than seeking medical treatment for something that was easily managed and cured, they would instead exercise their faith and pray for their daughter. Now, I recognize that this is not representative of the majority of any religious group. It's not representative of the majority of Christians. The news articles even made a point of saying that they didn't belong to any organized religion, although their practice was in keeping with things like Christian Science. I'm not trying to paint every Christian or believer with the same brush. Some of these issues are difficult. What rights do parents have? What responsibilities do they have with regard to the children that they're guardians of? What responsibilities does society have to protect those children when the parents, don't exercise good judgment? In this case, it's not even a matter of poor judgment. It's a decision that, despite the progresses of science, despite the fact that their daughter had been diagnosed and could have been treated, they decided to leave it up to their faith. And their conclusion was, at the end of it, when she died, that she simply didn't have enough faith, but they're optimistic that she might still be eligible for resurrection.
Seriously, it said that.
Yes. This is one of many things that religion does to poison the minds of people. It prevents you from making good decisions. I'm not saying these people are the status quo, but they killed their daughter. Yeah, I recognize there's a significant difference between actually sticking a knife in her and allowing nature to take its course, or allowing God to decide whether or not it's her time to go. But there's no reason to mince words. They killed their daughter. They are ultimately responsible for her death because they were her guardians and they failed to take the necessary steps that were obvious and available to save her life. And this isn't the first time it happens. This happens quite a bit, and the courts usually back away and say, oh, it's a difficult situation and we're sure where we should get involved, and I agree. But the one thing we can do is continue to educate people and to continue to speak out against, oh, well, what's so wrong with religion? This is what's wrong with religion. I realize it doesn't affect everybody, but it's also not the only thing that's wrong with religion. There's a little 11-year-old girl who's dead now because her parents were stupid and superstitious. If that doesn't bother you, you may be beyond hope. You have no moral compass. You can talk all day long about how your morals are derived from Christianity or from Jesus or from a God or from Buddha or from whatever. This is where we come up with our moral code. No, it's not. It's nonsense. The moral system presented by most religions is some of the most unjust, capricious nonsense anybody's ever come up with. The handful of good things there, like don't kill each other or don't steal somebody else's stuff, you don't need a God to tell you that, and if you do, you're also beyond hope. But when you sit by and allow religious freedom to be used as an excuse for irresponsibility that results in murder, you're complicit, you're immoral, and your religion has poisoned your mind just as much as those people's have. It's obscene, and it needs to stop. And that's all I have to say about that. But we have more callers on the line, too.
Well said.
Thank you.
Okay.
We have, is it Melissa?
Yeah.
How you doing?
Hi.
Hey, what's up?
You probably didn't pick the perfect time to call in, having gone off that rant. What do you want to talk about?
Okay. Well, earlier you mentioned something about belief and the will, and I'd like for you to kind of expand on that, because that's kind of, like, I think about, you know, a belief is just a belief. I mean, I could believe that, you know, the sky is freaking green unless somebody told me it was blue. Sure. You know, right. So I mean, like you, I don't know, I wanted you to expand on that, where you had said that belief, and you mentioned something about the will and thinking. Do you remember saying that like 10 minutes ago?
Oh yeah, I remember it, and I've gone over it a number of times. I'll hit it in a nutshell version. I view belief as the state of the mind's acceptance of a claim as true or likely true.
Okay.
Somebody made a claim, you think it's true, you think it's likely true, you believe the claim. I don't think belief is subject to will. I don't think you can, in a simple sense, say, I want to believe X, and therefore I'll believe it. You can believe it.
Right, it's like a total subjective thing. Like, it is. I mean, like I'm not an atheist, and I like reading about other religions and paganism and all kinds of stuff, because I really would like, well, I'd like to have all the answers, but I don't. But I was raised to be a Christian, and I totally rebelled from it, and I hated it. And I totally agree that, like, religion in itself, I mean, it's completely man-made, and it is really, like, messed up. Like, does parents who failed to give their daughter, you know, medical help, and they just relied on prayer, I mean, that's, like, downright dumb, and they were stupid. I mean,
I agree.
You know, that was so dumb. I mean, I don't think God, you know, like, I mean, hello, that's why there's other people on the planet, so, you know, doctors and whatnot to help out. But I'm just kind of curious, like, how can you, like, look outside and just look at the awesomeness and the vastness of this universe, and how did you get here? On what basis are you an atheist? I mean, why? I mean, like, where did this come from? What? I mean, tell me why you're an atheist. Because you don't have any scientific proof of God. I mean, like, what more do you possibly need?
Well, hang on, and I'm going to let Russell address this, but you seem to be saying that you just look around outside and that's enough evidence that a God exists?
Well, it's okay. It's probably not coming out right. But what I'm trying to say is, like, I don't know. I personally like just look at the vastness of the universe, and I just feel like, I don't know, something had to create this. I mean, something had to.
Hang on just a second. Let Russell address the question, and you can formulate thoughts in a second and respond.
If I may, the question seems to be kind of a non sequitur, because, I mean, the question is, how can you look at this stuff outside and not think that this other thing that I throw out at you also exists? And I think the real question would be, why would you look at trees and the sky and a vast universe and all that other stuff and think, Well, there must be a super powerful being in the sky who's something like humans and invented it all.
Well, right, because I mean, I can't at a whim just decide, hey, you know what, I'm going to make a tree today.
Right.
I mean, I
exactly.
can't do that. Like, I can't decide, hey, you know what, I'm going to
know
create
what?
a river. I'm gonna, you know, I'm just going to. I mean, I can't. There's like limits on what I can do.
Right.
So
you're exactly right. So, what makes you think that there's somebody out there who can make a tree? I mean, you know, by what steps of logic did you come to the conclusion, here's a tree, there must be a guy who's more powerful than me who made it?
Well, I guess I don't know if I'd even call it logic. I don't know. I guess within everyone, or at least for myself, there's like, you know, to believe in something beyond you, it gives you a sense of hope, and, you know, it kind of fulfills this void, you know, and I see that, and I'm kind of like, wow, I acknowledge that within myself, and it's kind of like, it's interesting.
Right.
What about ghosts and stuff? I mean, do you believe in ghosts and spirits and angels? I mean, do you believe that that exists?
No.
No, you don't?
No, why would we?
I mean, haven't you ever felt like a strong energy next to you?
No.
Like, you haven't, like, I mean, so, I mean, do you believe that, so you think that when you die, like you see, I mean, well, I don't know, but I mean, do you believe that there's something within you that's intangible?
In a way, yes.
Probably not in the way you're talking about. I think that when I'm dead, I'm dead. I may be wrong.
Right. I mean, I mean, how else can we possibly think about it? I mean,
well, the point is that
I don't like envision myself like up in heaven, like dancing around with angels. I just kind of like think of myself as when I die, I'll still be here on Earth. It's just that nobody will be able to see me.
Well, what good is that? I mean, I can understand having.
I don't know.
Hang on. I can understand having ideas that are comforting. It would be nice to think that there's some transcendent God being who loves me just for who I am, and you know, he's there when nobody else is, and he can help me find my car keys if I really ask him to.
Well, not that kind. I mean, he's not like a magic wand.
Hang on.
I mean, that's why they call it faith. Also,
no, also nothing. Let me finish my point. Yes, that kind of belief is comforting, but that doesn't mean it's real. And it doesn't mean there's any good reason to believe it. And maybe when I'm dead, I'm not dead. Maybe there's some aspect of my personality or whatever, consciousness, that exists as some kind of soul and goes somewhere. But there's not only no good reason to think that that's true, there's good reason to think that it's not true, because everything that's ever been attributed to the soul as an attribute is identifiable as something that's a product of the brain, which we have we don't have a perfect understanding of it. We have a pretty good understanding of the electrical chemical processes that make up who we are, our likes, our desires, our hopes, and everything else. We've got we've got a minute left. I'm sorry, Melissa, we didn't get back.
That's fine. It was fun. I enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Sure, and thanks. And you can always email tv@atheist-community.org if you want to carry on the conversation. And
quick
also,
plug. Do I have time?
Hurry.
There's a short story online that I think you guys might enjoy called "The Experimental Epistemologist." It's by Raymond Smullyan, and it's about somebody who thinks he knows things but doesn't know that he knows them. It's sort of a silly story.
So thanks to everybody who called in, and James, I know you're on the line with a point, but we have to let you go because we're out of time. Thanks for calling in. Anybody who didn't get on can email tv@atheist-community.org, or you can tune in again next week. Get your calls in earlier before we run out of time. Feel free to call in as soon as the show's on the air, and we'll try and get to you if you hang on. Thanks to everybody who involved in producing the show. We'll be at El Arroyo here in about 30 minutes for dinner. Any atheist or atheist-friendly person is welcome to attend. See you next week.
Bye.